Okay, Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Dear sisters and brothers, I hope all of you are coping well, doing fine, staying safe and also staying safe, inshallah. Today, inshallah, will be the last live lecture which I shall deliver. So basically, we have covered the topics for week 1 until week 11, inshallah. So I think that suffices for this semester, since we have only 12 weeks. And next week we shall dedicate to any form of discussions regarding assignments or final exams. I apologize for the blunder regarding the submission of assignments, because I overlooked the submissions made by Google Classroom. So I apologize for that. Alhamdulillah, everything is well. Each group has already submitted their assignments, and except for one group, perhaps they forgot either the poster or the video. But there's still time to submit. Please, the group who has not submitted that particular assignment, please do so as soon as possible, inshallah. Okay. So today, let's jump into the slides straight away. Okay. So for today, we are going to look at the Western scholarship and the Quran, and also the Quran in the academia. When we mention the academia here, we are going to look at the Quran or contemporary discourse regarding the Quran in Western academia, basically. So there is that what you call it, the relationship between Western scholarship and the Quran, and also the Quran in the academia. So these are the two subtopics which we shall go through in the next few slides, inshallah. So first, let us look at Western scholarship and the Quran. Yeah, we will look at the background, the first encounter between the West and the East, etc. Yeah. And an important term which normally comes up when we talk about Western scholarship and the Quran is the term Orientalism. Yeah. So what does this term actually mean? Yeah. So tracing back its origin, yeah, in part back to medieval studies of Islam and the Quran. So Orientalism basically traces its origin in part back to medieval studies of Islam and also the Quran. And Orientalism generally refers to the study of Eastern cultures or the Orient and traditions by Western scholars. Yeah, and it became very popular during the colonial period of the 19th and early 20th centuries, when the West colonized many parts of the Orient, many parts of Africa. Yeah. So that is why, for example, we have the School of Oriental and African Studies under the University of London, yeah, which looked into Eastern cultures and African cultures in that sense. So yeah, Orientalism basically refers to the study of Eastern cultures and traditions by Western scholars. More often than not, it is also referred to Western artists who were inspired by the Orient. If you look at the background photo that I purposely chose for this slide, and also a few slides that will come after this, it basically depicts how a Western artist saw or illustrate the Orient. Yeah. And Orientalism also refers to Western scholars who specialize, or Orientalists basically refer to Western scholars who specialize in the study of Oriental languages and in languages of the East, religions, and also cultures. So much of the early Western scholarship on the Quran developed from an Orientalist perspective, yeah, from this Orientalist perspective, and it had a very significant impact on historical and contemporary understandings of the Quran in the West. So there is this dichotomy. There is this dichotomy between the Orient and the Occident. The Occident meaning the West, and the Orient meaning the East. Yeah. However, Edward Said argued that the distinction between the Orient, and the East, and the Occident and the West does not represent a natural division. Rather, it is the result of an imaginative geography and must be examined as a product of cultural history. Yes, that division between the East and the West. So according to Edward Said, this is a result of an imaginative geography. Who actually determines the West or the East? And we have that notions that the West is superior, the East is inferior. So basically, these terms or this distinction between the East and the West, or the Orient and the Occident, is basically a product of cultural history. Yeah. So the prejudices and stereotypes which have traditionally accompanied this Orient-Occident distinction have meant that the term Orientalism has come to have a pejorative meaning, yeah, referring to Western scholarship that ostensibly lacks objectivity and reflects a bias towards Western thought and cultures. So that Western thought and culture. So that is why people in the East, yeah, or Muslims in particular, would have problems or would be skeptical when this term is being used. Yeah, Orientalist, Orientalism, the Orient, etc. So Muslims have not often held Orientalist scholarship in high regard as a result of these prejudices and biases. Yeah, which is reflected in not perhaps not all but most of the scholarship, as we will see, inshallah. So now let's trace early Western scholarship when it comes to Islam and also the Quran. Yeah. So before that, let's look at some history or trace some history from the 8th to the 15th century CE, or the Christian era, whereby the Muslims liberated. Yeah, some would say conquered. I prefer the word liberated, or basically gained control of Spain or Andalusia, yeah, whereby during this time there was largely peaceful coexistence between Muslim, Jews, and Christians in Andalusia, yeah. So the Muslims ruled Andalusia. Historians basically concur that for a large period, the Muslims, Jews, and Christians coexisted peacefully. Then came the 11th to the 13th century, yeah, uh, whereby the Crusades, which started to begin in the year 1095 until 1291, where military conflicts took place, generally aimed at recapturing the Holy Land of Jerusalem from Muslim rule. So these were the 2 centuries in which the Crusades or the Christians launched the Crusades to recapture Jerusalem from Muslim rule. So between the 12th to the 14th century CE, large quantities of translation into Latin of Arabic texts on science, medicine, and philosophy, as well as translation of the Quran and refutations of its texts, occurred from the 12th to the 14th century. And in the 14th century, the Council of Vienna, the universities of Rome, Bologna, Paris, Oxford, and Salamanca ordered to teach Oriental languages, though these had little practical effect initially. Yeah. So this is basically just to give an idea of what happened from the 8th to the 15th century. In the background, we have the rule of the Muslims of Andalusia, and also the Crusades, in which the Christians launched to recapture Jerusalem uh, from the Muslims. Yeah, and this efforts to translate Arabic texts, be it in medicine, be it in philosophy, yeah, to Latin, and also in the 14th century, the teaching of Oriental languages, including Arabic, yeah, in the universities of Rome, Bologna, Paris, Oxford, and Salamanca, which is basically it is known as the Council of Vienna. So there were significant scholars and scholarship during this time when it came to Western scholarship and the Quran. Yeah. So we have, for example, in the 8th century, as early as the 8th century, yeah, the John of Damascus, yeah, who was a Syrian monk who wrote Heresy of the Ismailites, one of the first, which is considered to be one of the first polemical writings against Islam. Yeah. And the 9th century, we have Al-Kindi Salah, which is the first complete refutation of the Quran, which was supposedly written by a Jacobite or a Nestorian Christian. In the 12th century, we have Robert Ketton, an Englishman who produced the first known Latin translation of the Quran. And in the 14th century, we have Raymond Lull, yeah, who wrote voluminous Arabic writings devoted to converting to Christianity, and he is known as the founder of Western Orientalism. So he had this objective in mind, to convert Muslims to Christianity. And we have Ricoldo da Montecroce, I'm not sure, who wrote an influential Christian denunciation of between the Christians, Jews, and Muslims. They were polemical writings against Islam by Western scholars, in that sense, by early Western scholars, as we have mentioned. So in Muslim Spain, we mentioned this now, Islamic, Christian, and Jewish cultures and religions coexisted for nearly 8th century, yeah, from the 8th to the 15th century, and they coexisted peacefully, yeah, for a significant part of this period. The inhabitants of Spain, on the whole, coexisted peacefully. So knowledge of Arabic language and literature was widespread even among the Christians and Jews, and it was common to have religious debate and dialogue. They were common, yeah. So despite having debates, disagreements, diversity of views, as we know, Andalusia is known to be a center of knowledge, center of learning for scholars at that time. And that is why even the Jews and Christians had knowledge of the Arabic language. And we also mentioned just now, translation activities took place where Arabic texts were then translated into Latin. So there was this vibrant, if we can describe it as such, scholarly activities which were celebrated and which were common part and parcel of the life of the community in Spain at that time. So strong focus on scholarship was reflected in the existence of over 70 libraries and hundreds of thousands of books in the Andalusian capital, Cordoba. So this is basically a brief history, a brief background of Muslim Spain. Around the period of Cordoba's decline, Europeans from outside Spain began to come into increasing contact with Islam and Muslim culture. So now we are talking about Europeans outside of Spain. Of course, we mentioned just now, inside Andalusia itself, the Jews, the Christians, and the Muslims, they coexisted peacefully. Yes, they had these debates among them regarding religion, etc. Yeah. But after the capture of Toledo in 1085 by Christian forces, the Catholic Archbishop Don Raimundo, I'm not sure how you pronounce his name again, and the Benedictine Abbot of Cluny, Peter the Venerable, began to commission scholars to work on the translation of various Arabic texts into Latin. So scientific and philosophical texts of Andalusia, which were mainly in Arabic, were translated into Latin. Also translated were religious works, such as earlier refutations of the Quran and the Quran itself. And these religious works were largely polemical, and it was produced in an environment where Christians and Muslims competed to show the superiority of their respective faiths, as well as the alleged lack of authenticity of their counterparts. And Christian scholars hoped to refute Islam to translations which aimed to show that the Quran was a fabricated document made up by Muhammad SAW and based on what he knew of Christianity and Judaism. And then the Crusades, as we mentioned just now, occurred, where it continued to fuel Europe's view of Islam as a great adversary or the great enemy of Christianity. And these Crusades were sanctioned by the Roman Catholic Church, and as such, anti-Islamic sentiment continued to grow. So a flood of new anti-Islamic writings began to be produced, and this represented the greatest obstacle to any genuine understanding or appreciation of Islam, Muslims, or the Quran at the popular level by European Christians. So they viewed Islam in a very negative way because Islam was considered their enemy. Now we move on to later Western scholarship. We are talking about the 15th to the 20th century, also moving to the 21st century to our contemporary or modern times. So from the 15th to 20th century, the Muslim Ottoman Empire was basically dominant force. Yeah. So the Ottoman Turkish state that spanned three continents, including Europe, spurred the study in Europe of Islam and Muslim societies for military, political, economic, and also missionary purposes. So in the 16th century, Arabic printing presses were installed in Venice and Rome, and Oriental studies was established at the University of Leiden since 1575. Yeah, and also this period saw an increase in the number of Western scholars with a knowledge of Arabic, and when they had that access to the Arabic language, when they had that mastery of the Arabic language, they had access to various religious texts, yeah, and they could analyze them, could come up with refutations of them or descriptions of them. So in the 17th century, Pope Alexander VII forbade production of the Quran in Latin, perhaps of the fear that Europeans might convert to Islam. Yeah, and the 18th to the 19th century is known as the Orientalist period, where Western scholars began to specialize in the study of Oriental languages, religion, and culture, which includes Arabic and Islam and Muslim societies. So these are some of the significant scholars and scholarship when it comes to later Western scholarship of Islam and the Quran. So we have John of Segovia, who is a Spanish Catholic theologian who produced a Castilian translation of the Quran. In fact, he did this with a Muslim jurist, Isa the Jabir, I'm not sure how you pronounce his name, yeah, who was well known and flourished in the year 1450. Yeah. And then we also have Nicholas of Cusa. Sorry, I'm also not sure of how to pronounce this, who was a German cardinal who wrote Shifting the Quran. And he argued the Quran was a beneficial introduction to the gospel. Yeah. So it was not, in this sense, it wasn't that polemical. It was more of, some might argue it was perhaps a more objective study of Islam and the Quran. In the 16th century, there was a complete Arabic Quran printed in Italy, yeah, around 1538. And as I read, they tried to sell these copies of the Quran, yeah, in Muslim countries or to Muslim societies, but it wasn't received that well. In the 17th century, we have scholars such as William Bedwell, an English priest and scholar who produced a catalogue of standard Muslim naming and numbering of Quranic chapters. And then we have Joseph Justus Scaliger, a leading Arabist who argued that the Quran should be read to understand language and history. And also we have Abraham Wheelock, an English minister and professor of Arabic who produced a translation, not only translation, but also refutation of the Quran. So during the early Ottoman period, yeah, from the beginning of the 15th century, the Muslim Ottoman Empire's presence in Europe spurred Europe to greatly increase its knowledge about Islam and Muslim societies. Why so? Because of military, political, and also economic reasons, yeah, and to a large extent also designed to further the Christian missionary effort. Yeah, they wanted to, there is a term, proselytize. I'm not sure how you pronounce that word again. Basically, or you can term it as da'wah of the Christians to convert Muslims into Christianity. And the 16th century, yeah, saw the beginning of European colonization of parts of the Muslim world, and that also provided the motivation in the West to continue the study of Islam and the Quran, because perhaps they wanted to understand, yeah, the people and societies whom they colonized. A more extensive program for the study of Islam and Arabic in universities were offered, yeah, to students. So the Orientalist period, as we saw just now, which began in the 18th to the 19th century, yeah, saw continued colonization of the Muslim world and the beginning of the Enlightenment. Yeah, Enlightenment. This refers to the Enlightenment in Christianity, the call for Reformation by Martin Luther, etc. Yeah, where Western thinkers began to question publicly the very foundations of religion, particularly Christianity and the Church. So efforts were also being made to further European understanding of Islam and the Quran, where new teaching institutions began to appear in Paris and Vienna, which provided courses in both language and Islamic culture. In the 19th century, bilingual editions of the Quran became more common, and European universities began to expand their program of Arabic and Islamic studies to include analysis of the Quran. Yeah, and, and as such, study of Islam moved from being a subset of Oriental studies to an independent field of academic knowledge. So in the 19th century, Islamic studies, yeah, began to be recognized as an independent field of academic knowledge. And as such, there was an increase in the study of Arabic, which led to numerous publications on Islamic religious, political, and cultural history, and a growing number of translations and analysis of its religious and historical text. Yeah, as I mentioned just now, as more and more scholars who were well versed in the Arabic language, then they had a lot of resources at their disposal to analyze, to study, yeah, and to come up with scholarly work in relation to Islam, Muslim societies, and the Quran itself. So who are the significant scholars and scholarship in the period known as the Orientalist period? So we have, for example, George Sale, I don't know if it's Sale or Saller, I'm not sure how you pronounce his name, who produced the first published English translation of the Quran made directly from Arabic. Yeah, so he translated the Quran from Arabic into English. And in the 19th century, we have Gustav Flugel, who translated the Quran and introduced a Western numbering system for Quranic verses. So how about the Quran in the academia? So here again, we are going to focus our attention on the Quran in Western academia. Yeah, and as we will see, there are also Muslim scholars who are involved or who basically took positions in Western universities and contributed to the discourse of Islam and Muslim societies and the Quran itself. Yeah. So contemporary Western scholarship by the 20th century, the study of Islam and Muslim societies had emerged as a significant area of Western scholarship. So the 20th and 21st centuries have seen a breaking down of the traditional divide between the Western and Muslim worlds. Yeah, so whereby there was increasing number of scholars collaborating across different faiths and countries of origin to research, yeah, about Islam and Muslim societies. And there also was an effort to combine traditional Islamic and Western approaches in the study of Islam and the Quran, yeah, because of this breaking down of the barrier or the divide between the West and Muslim worlds. These were then made possible. So since the World War II, in particular, Islamic studies at universities throughout the Western world has been developed and extended to include a large number of programs related to Islamic languages, basically Arabic, yeah, to an extent perhaps also Persian and other languages, yeah, which are closely associated to Muslim societies, history, and also social sciences. So what were the approaches, yeah, which these scholars adopted in regards to the study of Islam and Muslim societies? So many scholars have explored general areas related to the Quran without questioning Muslim accounts of its origin. So now there was not much debate regarding the origins of the Quran. Yeah, perhaps they study the Quran as it is, describes it as it is, rather than producing polemical works to question the Quran's authenticity or origins. Yeah. Having said that, others have questioned the traditional Muslim understandings of the origins of the Quran by applying similar methods to those used in the studies of the Bible. Yeah, so they applied the same approach in which they studied the Bible. Yeah, so they imposed the same approach when studying the Quran or Islamic texts or sources. So any study of the Quran must always be examined as a product of each scholar's own cultural history. So to better understand, yeah, and to appreciate the motivation behind scholarly works, we have to basically appreciate, yeah, or acknowledge that each scholar was basically brought up or trained, yeah, or I mean, there is always that cultural history which influences the views of such scholars. Yeah. So the works basically reflected the cultural understandings, subjectivities, and prejudices of the scholar, whereby one would discern how a scholar's subjectivities or prejudices may have affected. So it is important basically to discern how a scholar's subjectivities or prejudices may have affected their work, yeah, and remain aware of our own understandings and subjectivities and the influence they may be having on our views of such scholarship. So sometimes we also have certain prejudgments, certain what do you call it? Certain cultural history, which also influence how we view such works. So here we are going to look at a number of Orientalists, yeah, a number of Orientalists uh, who are basically known for their work on the Quran or Islam in general and Muslim societies. So here we have Theodore Noldecker, again, I'm not sure how you pronounce his name, who described the Quran as a book composed of unstable words and letters and full of variants, which as a result could not be possibly divine. Yeah. So here he argues that Quran could not be possibly divine. Why? Because according to him or according to his observation, the Quran is composed of unstable words and letters and full of variants. And he is known to be one of the foremost scholars to work on rearranging the Quran into a more chronological order rather than the order that we are familiar with. He attempted to arrange the Quran according to chronological order, yani according to when the verse was revealed. Yeah. So he accepted the structural coherence of major units of text. Remember, we looked at the issue of coherence of the Quran, and also we have mentioned that the coherence of the Quran is also considered as a part of the inimitability of the Quran. So here, Theodore Noldecker in general accepted the structural coherence of major units of text, yeah. But then he examined phraseology, manner, and style of passages within a given chapter in order to determine their likely sequence. Yeah, because remember, he was trying to arrange, or he attempted to arrange the Quran in a chronological order. So this issue of sequence is of significance in doing so. However, he is criticized of being relying too heavily on style in deciding the order of chapters, and that his assumption that Muhammad's initial emotion and enthusiasm gradually waned was too simplistic. So there were scholars who criticized, not Muslim scholars, but also Western scholars who criticized his findings or his views when it came to the Quran. Then we have also John Wansbrough, yeah, who was one of the foremost proponents of the revisionist approach to the Quran, whereby he examined the evidence for the acceptance and canonization of the Quran, yeah, and he argued that the Quran was not completed until around 150 years after the death of the Prophet ﷺ. And he argued that traditional accounts of the Quran's compilation were a salvation history, yeah, or myth that was projected backwards by Muslims of the Umayyad period. So basically, he is arguing against what we would or what we would believe when it comes to the compilation of the Quran. And he argues that Islam was more likely to have been a sect which grew out of debates within the Judeo-Christian tradition. And because of this, Muslims in general have been very critical of Wansbrough's approach, given its lack of recognition of core Islamic beliefs about the Quran. Yeah, and he is also criticized by a number of Western scholars who have noted that the gap between the time of the Prophet ﷺ and the earliest evidence of a Quranic text is much shorter than he suggests, but he suggests 150 years after the demise of the Prophet ﷺ, when in fact history has proven that it was compiled uh, way before that, not up to 150 years. Yeah. And we have also actually gone through this issue of compilation of the Quran. You know, when I'm not sure in which material of which week, but if I'm not mistaken, we did touch upon the issue of the compilation of the Quran. And then we have Patricia Crone and Michael Cook, who produced this book on Hagerism, yeah, whereby they refer to Islam as Hagerism based on Muhammad Sallallahu claim to be a descendant of Prophet Abraham's slave boy Hajar, yeah, Ismail from Hajar. So they argue that Islam was originally a form of Judaism practiced by the Hajarins. And they suggest that the Quran first began to be compiled under the governor of Al-Hajjaj of Iraq, yeah. And because of these views, of these hypotheses or these theories which they came up with, they came under immediate attack from Muslim and also non-Muslim scholars, yeah, due to its heavy reliance on hostile sources, yeah, whereby they were criticized for the use or abuse of its Greek and Syrian sources, and the product in this book was deemed to be bitterly anti-Islamic in tone, yeah, not only bitterly anti-Islamic in tone, but also very anti-Arabian. And then we have Andrew Rippin. Yeah, Andrew Rippin. I had when I was doing my PhD, I had the opportunity to listen to one of his lectures live when he came to Melbourne. Yeah, and he is known for his questioning of traditional accounts of Islamic history. Yeah, and he argues that the Quran must be understood within a broader monotheistic rather than purely Arabian environment, and that it should be situated within its literary tradition and at the focal point of a reader response study. Yeah. He is often accused of arbitrarily ditching history in favor of literary analysis. However, in general, Andrew Rippin's work on early tafsir scholarship has been well received and is recognized as providing a valuable contribution to Quranic scholarship. So despite some of his views, which one might consider to be odd or views that perhaps we as Muslims do not agree with, yeah, some of his works on early tafsir scholarship is of benefit and is considered to be a valuable contribution to Quranic scholarship. And then we have Christoph Luxemburg, which is we don't know who he is. Basically, it's a pseudonym, yeah, of a German scholar who also disputes the Orthodox Muslim account of the Quran, whereby he argues that the Quran is based on a Christian liturgical document written in a language closer to Aramaic than Arabic, yeah, and this is based on his knowledge of early Semitic languages and his study of the earliest available copies of the Quran. And he suggests that understandings of the Quran today are based on an incorrect understanding of its original context and function. And he proposed a recomposition of the Quran, which would allow, yeah, sorry, he is being criticized, yeah, because his proposed recomposition of the Quran allows too much scope for superimposing his own preconceptions of what may be found in the text. And then we have Gerd Puin, again, I'm not sure how we pronounce his name, who suggests that parts of the Quran may even be 100 years older than Islam itself, meaning he argues that parts of the Quran could perhaps predate, yeah, the coming of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that the Quran is most probably a kind of cocktail of texts that were not all understood even at the time of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this is based on his study of some of the 15,000 ancient sheets of paper discovered in Yemen in 1972 and said to contain sections of the oldest known extant record of Quranic verses, yeah, which then shows unconventional verse orderings and textual variation. And he believes that a fifth of the Quranic text is incomprehensible, and that by proving that the Quran has a history which he says even precedes the coming of Prophet Muhammad SAW. He claims that he will enable Muslims to engage in a discussion of the Quran, which does not assume it is just God's unaltered word. So it's implying that the Quran is, or perhaps has been altered. So this is his suggestion and views. And then we have Richard Bell and William Montgomery Watt. Yeah, these are famous Orientalists. Yeah, who have had a significant impact on Western understandings of the Quran. So, for example, Richard Bell, he recognized that the Quran is a complex text worthy of serious study, and commented that few books exercise a wider or deeper influence upon the spirit of man. So this is basically a form of his acknowledgement of the Quran. And he even suggested that the present form of the Quran rests upon written documents that go back to Prophet Muhammad's lifetime. Yeah. And that the modern study of the Quran had not raised any serious questions of its authenticity. Yeah, we as Muslims believe that the Quran that we have today, it is authentic, and this can also be historically proven, and this has also been done by many Muslim scholars. Yeah. Having said that, Bell questioned the Islamic belief that the Quran is the direct word of God. Yeah. And he argues that Muhammad SAW played a significant role in the composition and in the writing of the Quran, and that the revelation underwent considerable revisions during the Prophet's lifetime and emerged as a finalized written scripture during what Bell refers to as the book period, namely the last 8 years of Muhammad Sallallahu time in Medina. What, on the other hand, believe that the Quran came from God and that it is divinely inspired, and that the Quran was the word of God for a particular time and place, and that, like the Bible, the commands given in the Quran were valid for the society to which it was primarily addressed. And one of the works of both Watt and Richard Bell is the introduction to the Quran. And we also have Muslim scholars in the West, whereby there are increasing number of Muslim scholars who are taking up positions at Western universities, and they call for new approaches to the Quran, for example, which combine traditional Islamic methodologies with modern theories. So we have, for example, Fazlur Rahman. We've mentioned him when we looked at contextualist approach to interpretation of the Quran. So we looked at Fazlur Rahman as an example, who focused much of his work on considering the importance of context to Quranic interpretation. And we have Amina Wadud, a very controversial figure, who is basically a feminist scholar of the Quran, and she is also known for the controversy of leading Salah, And then we have Muhammad Arkoon, who combined knowledge from a range of disciplines in the study of Quranic hermeneutics. And we have, as in the photo here, the picture here, Khalid Abu Fadl, who is highly critical of the literalist readings of the Quran. And also, we would like to highlight here the Encyclopedia of the Quran, in which Jane Damon Mac Aulaifi, I'm not sure how you pronounce the name again, who is the general editor of this encyclopedia, whereby this encyclopedia draws on extensive scholarly work by both Muslim and non-Muslim scholars in areas such as linguistic, rhetorical, and narrative analysis of the Quran, and it provides extensive data on terms, concepts, places, and history, and exegesis on subjects within the scope of Quranic studies, and it represents the first comprehensive multi-volume reference work on the Quran to appear in a Western language. For the general editor herself, she focuses on the Quran, its tafsir or interpretation, as well as early Islamic history and relations between Islam and Christianity. So this is just an example of a product, the Encyclopedia of the Quran, whereby the contributors are not only they receive contributions from both Muslim and non-Muslims, who basically came together to provide scholarly works on various aspects of Quranic studies. If you would like to read further, you could perhaps refer to this book, The Quran Introduction by Abdullah Sa'id, yeah, which I've based all of the information which I have presented in this lecture based on information found in this book. Okay. Okay, I guess I will stop here. Yeah. And inshallah, we shall discuss this further in our virtual session or virtual meeting on Thursday afternoon, inshallah. So if you have any questions or any issues that you might want to raise, perhaps you can do so in our meeting on Thursday afternoon, inshallah. So أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله العظيم لي ولكم. Uh, I apologize for any shortcomings. To be honest, I am not familiar with Orientalist works when it comes to Islamic studies and the Quran itself. This is beyond my expertise, but I try to the best of my ability to present to you what I know based on readings of certain texts or certain books. Okay. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Stay safe, stay sane, take care, sisters and brothers.